When Spider-Man punched the Hulk so hard he sent him flying into orbit with a single blow, it became crystal clear that something had changed, something fundamental that transformed the friendly neighborhood wall crawler into one of the most powerful beings in the entire Marvel universe. The year was 1989, and Peter Parker stood at the center of a cosmic storm that would elevate him far beyond his usual street-level heroics. He had become something more than Spider-Man, more than human, more than a hero with proportionate spider abilities. He had become a god, wielding powers that rivaled Superman himself, capable of reshaping matter with a thought, of flying through the vacuum of space unaided, of channeling energies that could obliterate entire buildings. This transformation would define one of the most memorable periods in Spider-Man's publication history, a saga where unlimited power met unlimited responsibility, where Peter Parker discovered what it truly meant to possess abilities far beyond anything he'd ever imagined. But this wasn't just a simple power boost, a temporary enhancement that would fade after a single issue. This was the Enigma Force itself, flowing through Peter's veins, ancient cosmic energy that had chosen him as its champion, its vessel, its captain universe. And the journey to understanding what had happened, why it had happened, and what it would cost would take Spider-Man through battles against foes he'd never faced before, push him to limits he didn't know existed, and ultimately force him to make choices that would echo across the multiverse itself. The story begins not with cosmic rays or mystical artifacts, but with science, with an experiment conducted in the laboratories of Empire State University. Peter Parker, ever the dedicated student despite his web-slinging responsibilities, had agreed to help Professor Maxwell Lubish with a graduate research project. Lubish was a brilliant scientist in his own right, a man whose work focused on tapping into extra-dimensional energy sources, forces that existed beyond the normal three-dimensional space humans typically perceived. The machine he'd constructed was designed to access these energies, to open a doorway to power that could revolutionize how humanity understood physics itself. Peter, always eager to contribute to scientific advancement when he wasn't busy stopping muggers and bank robbers, volunteered his time to assist with the experiments. The laboratory hummed with energy that evening, equipment arranged in careful configurations around the central apparatus, a device that looked like something torn from the pages of science fiction. Monitors displayed readings that climbed steadily as Lubish made final adjustments, his hands moving with practiced precision across the control panel. Peter stood nearby, his spider sense surprisingly quiet, giving him no warning of what was about to unfold. Then everything went catastrophically wrong. The machine, pushed, perhaps too far too fast, began to overload. Energy readings spiked beyond expected parameters, alarms started blaring through the laboratory, and a dangerous glow emanated from the core of the device. In that critical moment, as the experimental apparatus threatened to explode and potentially kill everyone in the building, Peter's spider sense finally screamed to life. Without hesitation, acting on instinct honed through years of being Spider-Man, Peter shoved Professor Lubish clear of the danger zone, throwing the older man to safety behind a reinforced barrier. But there was no time for Peter himself to escape. The machine detonated with tremendous force, unleashing the very energies it had been designed to contain. Instead of being released in a controlled manner, the extra-dimensional power erupted in an uncontrolled cascade, a torrent of cosmic force that caught Peter Parker directly in its path. The young man was engulfed in blinding light, his entire body bombarded by energies that human beings were never meant to experience, forces from dimensions beyond normal comprehension flooding through his cells and DNA. When the light finally faded and the alarms fell silent, Peter found himself still standing, seemingly unharmed despite having taken the full brunt of an explosion that should have killed him instantly. Professor Lubish, shaken but grateful, rushed to check on his student, amazed that Peter had survived. But Peter himself felt strange, different in ways he couldn't quite articulate. Something had changed inside him, something fundamental that he couldn't identify. His spider sense felt sharper, more acute than ever before. His muscles seemed to carry more strength, as if they'd been reinforced at the molecular level. There was a tingling throughout his entire body, a sensation of power barely contained beneath his skin. He assured Lubish that he was fine, brushed off the incident as just another day in the life of someone with spider powers, and headed home to Mary Jane, still not realizing what had actually happened. What Peter didn't know, couldn't have known, was that Professor Lubish's machine hadn't been tapping into some random extra-dimensional energy source. It had accidentally connected to the Enigma Force itself, a sentient, cosmic entity of unimaginable power. And when that connection was established, when the floodgates were torn open by the machine's malfunction, the Enigma Force had flowed directly into Peter Parker. The Enigma Force was no mere power source, no simple energy field to be harnessed and controlled. It was ancient beyond measure, a living manifestation of the universe's will to protect itself, a guardian force that had existed since the dawn of time. Over millions of years, the Enigma Force had selected champions to wield its power, ordinary beings who would be transformed into extraordinary heroes known as Captain Universe. These chosen individuals received incredible abilities, cosmic awareness, and the strength to face threats that endangered reality itself. The Enigma Force would bond with its host for as long as necessary to address whatever crisis had prompted its intervention, granting them access to virtually unlimited power. Once the threat was neutralized, the Enigma Force would move on, seeking another champion in another place, another time. The process was usually deliberate, controlled, the Enigma Force fully merging with its chosen host's consciousness so they understood what was happening and why. But the laboratory accident had disrupted this normal procedure. The Enigma Force had been pulled into Peter Parker through technological interference rather than by its own choice, and while it had indeed chosen Peter as a worthy vessel, the abrupt nature of the transfer meant something was blocked. Peter received the power, but not the awareness that should have accompanied it. So as Peter Parker went about his life in the days following the accident, he genuinely believed that his own spider powers had simply increased, perhaps mutated further from exposure to those strange energies. His strength seemed greater, allowing him to lift heavier objects with less effort. His durability had improved dramatically, his body shrugging off impacts that would have seriously injured him before. His spider sense had become so sensitive that he had to consciously suppress it to avoid being overwhelmed by the constant influx of danger signals from the entire city around him. He could feel potential threats from blocks away, could sense violence before it erupted, could detect hostile intent with preternatural accuracy. New abilities began manifesting as well, powers that had nothing to do with spiders. Energy crackled from his fingertips when emotions ran high, allowing him to fire concussive blasts of pure force. His webbing seemed to respond to his thoughts, moving in ways that defied physics as he mentally directed its trajectory. He discovered he could fly, actually fly, lifting himself through the air without any visible means of propulsion, moving through three-dimensional space with perfect grace and control. These developments confused Peter greatly, because while his original spider powers had always made a kind of biological sense, these new abilities seemed to defy everything he understood about how his powers worked. Spiders didn't shoot energy beams from their hands, didn't fly through the air, didn't manipulate matter with their minds. Yet here he was, doing exactly those things, and he had no framework for understanding why. Peter being Peter, he tried to apply logic to the situation, reasoning that perhaps his radioactive spider bite had unlocked latent potential that was only now manifesting, or maybe his exposure to various forms of radiation over his years as Spider-Man had caused additional mutations. He didn't share these concerns with Mary Jane at first, not wanting to worry her, though his wife could tell something was different about her husband. There was an energy around him now, a presence that seemed to fill whatever room he occupied, and sometimes when he moved, she could swear she saw his costume shimmer with starlight. But Peter insisted everything was fine, that he just felt stronger lately, more capable of handling the demands of being Spider-Man. He had no idea that he'd been chosen by cosmic forces for a purpose far greater than stopping petty criminals. The true test of Peter's new abilities would come through circumstances he couldn't have anticipated, through a conspiracy that had been brewing in the shadows of the Marvel Universe, orchestrated by a being whose hatred for Earth's heroes knew no bounds. Loki, the Asgardian god of mischief and brother to Thor, had been nursing a particular grudge for many years. Decades earlier, One of Loki's schemes had inadvertently led to the formation of the Avengers, Earth's mightiest heroes, coming together specifically to combat a threat he'd created. That failure had festered in Loki's mind, a constant reminder that his manipulations could backfire spectacularly. Now, disguised as an ordinary businessman in an impeccable white suit, Loki had hatched what he believed to be his most brilliant plan yet. Instead of attacking the heroes directly, instead of confronting them with his own godly powers, he would turn the entire supervillain community into his weapon. He would orchestrate acts of vengeance on a scale never before attempted, coordinating assaults that would leave Earth's heroes scattered, defeated, and dead. Loki's genius lay in identifying a fundamental truth about the ongoing conflicts between heroes and villains. For years, the battles had fallen into predictable patterns. Spider-Man fought the Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus. The Fantastic Four battled Dr. Doom and the Puppet Master. The Avengers faced down Ultron and the Masters of Evil. The X-Men clashed with Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants. These repeated encounters meant heroes knew their enemies intimately, understood their tactics and weaknesses, had developed specific strategies for dealing with each threat. What if those patterns were disrupted? What if Spider-Man suddenly found himself fighting villains who normally tangled with the Avengers? What if Thor's enemies attacked Iron Man? What if the Fantastic Four's rogues gallery turned their attention to the X-Men? The heroes would be caught off guard, forced to face threats they'd never encountered before, unable to rely on the experience and familiarity that had saved them so many times in the past. It was a simple concept, but potentially devastatingly effective. Loki set about implementing it with methodical precision. He approached the most powerful villains in the Marvel Universe, beings of immense capability who had each been repeatedly thwarted by heroes. Dr. Victor Von Doom, the armored monarch of Latveria, whose brilliant mind was matched only by his monumental ego. Magneto, the master of magnetism, mutant supremacist who believed Homo superior should rule over Homo sapiens. Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, the crime lord who controlled vast criminal empires with an iron fist. The Wizard, scientific genius and leader of the Frightful Four. The Mandarin, wielding 10 rings of alien power from his fortress in China. The Red Skull, Nazi war criminal and symbol of fascism itself. These were not minor threats, not small-time criminals looking to rob banks. These were individuals who had brought the world to its knees, who commanded vast resources, who possessed abilities that made them nearly unstoppable. Loki brought them together through careful manipulation, making each believe they were the mastermind behind a grand alliance while he pulled strings from the shadows. He called them the Prime Movers, positioning them as the architects of a new order where villains would finally triumph over heroes. To kickstart this conspiracy, Loki engineered a massive jailbreak at the Vault, the maximum security prison designed to hold superpowered criminals. Dozens of villains were freed in a single coordinated assault, flooding the streets with dangerous individuals, all bearing grudges against the heroes who'd imprisoned them. But these freed criminals weren't simply turned loose to cause random chaos. They were given direction, targets, specific heroes to attack based on which matchups would be most unexpected and disadvantageous for the good guys. The Trapster, normally a Spider-Man villain, might be sent after Thor. Ultron, typically an Avengers threat, could attack Daredevil. The Juggernaut might face off against the Fantastic Four. Every pairing was calculated to maximize confusion and minimize the hero's advantages. The result was chaos across the Marvel Universe, with heroes suddenly fighting battles they weren't prepared for against enemies whose capabilities they didn't fully understand. And into this maelstrom of villain swapping and coordinated attacks walked Peter Parker, his cosmic powers barely understood, about to face threats far beyond his typical rogues gallery. The first encounter came with the Trapster, formerly known by the laughable name Paste Pot Pete, a criminal who used various adhesive compounds as weapons. Under normal circumstances, the Trapster would barely register as a threat to Spider-Man, more comedic relief than genuine danger. But these were not normal circumstances. The Trapster, emboldened by Loki's conspiracy and determined to prove himself worthy of being included in the villain swap, attacked Peter with unusual cunning and preparation. Using his paste guns, weapons that could spray hardening compounds capable of trapping even super-strong individuals, the trapster managed to catch Spider-Man off guard. Peter found himself coated in quick hardening adhesive, his body being dragged down by the weight of the substance even as it solidified around him. In any other situation, this would have been merely inconvenient, requiring some clever maneuvering to escape. But the trapster had specifically prepared for a water-based attack, leading the fight toward the Hudson River. Before Peter could fully react, he was sent plummeting into the river, the hardened paste weighing him down, dragging him beneath the surface toward what should have been certain death by drowning. The trapster, convinced he'd finally killed Spider-Man, didn't bother to confirm his victory, a fatal mistake for any villain. Beneath the water's surface, as Peter struggled against the restraints holding him, that's when his new powers truly manifested for the first time. Panic and desperation triggered something deep within him, some reservoir of strength he hadn't known existed. His muscles surged with energy far beyond anything his spider powers had ever provided. The supposedly unbreakable paste shattered like glass as Peter flexed against it, fragments floating away in the murky water. He burst from the river like a missile, water streaming from his costume, energy crackling around his body in a visible aura. The trapster, looking back at the sound of splashing, saw Spider-Man rising from what should have been his watery grave, and the villain's confidence evaporated instantly. When they fought again, it wasn't even close to being a fair contest. Peter moved with speed that left afterimages, dodged paste gun blasts before the trapster could finish pulling the trigger, and delivered a single punch that sent the villain flying through the air to land unconscious 50 feet away. That battle set the pattern for what was to come. As the Acts of Vengeance conspiracy unfolded, Peter found himself facing an increasingly dangerous array of foes, villains who had no business fighting Spider-Man according to the usual rules of comic book conflicts. Titania, the super-strong woman who normally battled the Hulk and She-Hulk, came at him with rage and confidence, expecting to crush the web-slinger like an insect. She'd fought Spider-Man before, and had always found him tough but manageable, someone who relied on agility and cleverness to compensate for his relatively modest strength. But when their fists connected this time, when Titania threw her weight into a punch meant to shatter Spider-Man's skull, she felt her own hand go numb from the impact. Peter hadn't just blocked the strike, he'd matched it, his enhanced strength now operating on a completely different scale. The fight that followed was brutal and one-sided, with Titania unable to comprehend how Spider-Man had become so powerful. She landed hits that would have flattened most heroes, combinations of punches that carried tons of force behind them, and Spider-Man barely staggered, shrugging off attacks that should have broken bones. When he struck back, his blows sent her reeling, cracking the pavement where she fell. Then came Magneto, the master of magnetism himself, a mutant of tremendous power who normally faced the X-Men. Magneto's interest in Spider-Man was both strategic and personal. The magnetic manipulator had heard reports of Spider-Man's enhanced abilities and wanted to investigate, curious about whether these new powers indicated Peter might be a mutant experiencing a secondary mutation. If Spider-Man was indeed a mutant, perhaps he could be recruited to Magneto's cause, becoming an asset in the eternal struggle between mutants and baseline humans. Magneto's approach was measured, attempting initially to engage in dialogue even as he demonstrated his fearsome abilities. He lifted cars with casual gestures, tore metal structures from buildings, created magnetic fields that could repel or attract anything containing iron. The display was meant to be intimidating, a demonstration of power that would make Spider-Man see the futility of resistance. Instead, Peter responded with his own demonstration, firing energy blasts from his hands that disrupted Magneto's magnetic fields, using his newfound flight capabilities to match Magneto in three-dimensional aerial combat. The battle raged across the city, two beings wielding powers that could reshape the battlefield itself. Magneto quickly realized Spider-Man was not a mutant, that these abilities stemmed from some other source entirely, and his interest shifted from recruitment to curiosity. What manner of power could grant a human being capabilities that rivaled some of the most powerful mutants alive? But before he could investigate further, before the battle could reach any sort of conclusion, Magneto sensed something that demanded his immediate attention. Among the prime movers, among the villains Loki had gathered for his conspiracy, was the Red Skull, the Nazi war criminal whose very existence was an affront to everything Magneto believed in. Magneto was a Holocaust survivor, a man who had watched his family die in concentration camps, who had suffered under Nazi ideology, who had vowed never to allow such evil to threaten the world again. The knowledge that he was indirectly working alongside the Red Skull, even in the loosest coalition, was intolerable. Without another word to Spider-Man, without even acknowledging their battle was being abandoned, Magneto departed, flying toward a confrontation with the Red Skull that would end with the Nazi being buried alive in an underground bunker. The brothers Grimm came next, two villains who normally fought Luke Cage and Iron Fist, masters of creating illusions through advanced technology. They thought they could confuse Spider-Man with their tricks, overwhelming his senses with false images and phantom threats. They hadn't accounted for how much Peter's spider sense had evolved, how it could now pierce through deceptions to identify real dangers. Every illusion they created was immediately recognized as fake, every holographic attack identified as harmless light and sound. Spider-Man moved through their illusions like they didn't exist. His enhanced perceptions cutting straight to the truth, and when he reached the brothers Grimm themselves, they fell just as quickly as the trapster had. Goliath, the size-changing villain who could grow to tremendous heights, believed his increased mass and strength would be sufficient to crush Spider-Man. Dr. Doom had even enhanced Goliath's abilities, covering him with sensors designed to analyze Spider-Man's new powers, to gather data that Doom could use for his own purposes. The battle took them to Liberty Island, where Goliath grew to his maximum size, towering over the Statue of Liberty itself, a giant among men ready to prove his superiority. Spider-Man responded by hitting him with cosmic energy blasts, each strike causing Goliath to grow even larger as the energy fed into his size-changing powers. Larger and larger, Goliath grew. 50 feet tall, 70 feet, 100 feet, until his heart couldn't sustain the strain of pumping blood through such a massive body. He collapsed into the water, apparently dead, leaving Spider-Man horrified that he might have accidentally killed someone. Dr. Doom watched these battles with intense interest, his genius mind calculating the implications of Spider-Man's power increase. Doom was not participating directly in most of the acts of vengeance battles, instead using a Doombot to represent himself at the Prime Movers gatherings while he pursued his own agenda. And that agenda had become singularly focused on one goal: stealing Spider-Man's cosmic abilities for himself. Doom had stolen the power cosmic from the Silver Surfer in the past, had possessed the abilities of the Beyonder, had wielded energies that made him godlike. He recognized power when he saw it, and whatever Spider-Man had gained represented a threat to Doom's eventual dominance. More than that, it represented an opportunity. If Doom could drain those energies, analyze them, understand how they worked, he could potentially enhance himself permanently, elevating himself beyond even the considerable power he already commanded. So, Doom began orchestrating attacks specifically designed not to defeat Spider-Man, but to test him, to push his limits, to gather data that would allow Doom to construct a device capable of siphoning the cosmic energy from Peter's body. Doom sent Tess-1, a technologically advanced robot designed to hunt super soldiers, upgraded specifically to absorb energy from superhuman sources. The machine was formidable, its systems allowing it to adapt to whatever attacks were thrown at it, learning and evolving in real-time combat situations. Tess-1 fought Spider-Man in the streets of New York, its scanners analyzing every energy signature, every power manifestation, every application of cosmic force. When Spider-Man fired energy blasts, Tess-1 absorbed them, growing stronger from the absorbed power. When Spider-Man used his enhanced strength, Tess-1 measured it, calculating the limits of Peter's physical capabilities. The battle was almost clinical in its execution, Tess-1 methodically testing different variables while Spider-Man fought desperately to protect civilian bystanders. Eventually, Peter destroyed the robot, but not before it had gathered extensive data, information that was transmitted back to Dr. Doom's base for analysis. Doom studied the results with satisfaction, beginning construction on a device that would steal the cosmic power directly from Spider-Man's body. Doom's next move involved the Wizard and Dragon Man, the dragon-like android with the mind of a child. The Wizard had found Spider-Man's discarded mask, a moment of desperation when Peter had considered giving up being Spider-Man entirely, overwhelmed by the weight of these new powers and the danger they seemed to bring to everyone around him. Using the mask's scent, the Wizard commanded Dragon Man to track down Spider-Man and kill him. Dragon Man, for all his childlike mentality, was incredibly powerful, capable of flying, breathing fire, and possessing strength that rivaled the Thing. The android found Spider-Man and attacked with simple, straightforward tactics, using raw power in an attempt to overwhelm the web-slinger. The battle derailed a subway train, putting hundreds of lives at risk, and Spider-Man had to balance fighting Dragon Man with saving innocent people. He succeeded on both counts, destroying the android while protecting every single passenger, and in doing so, he finally started to win back public opinion. The citizens of New York, who had been growing fearful of this superpowered Spider-Man, saw him sacrifice his own safety to save others, saw him use his incredible abilities not for destruction, but for protection. Meanwhile, Dr. Doom came dangerously close to succeeding in his plan to steal Spider-Man's powers. He'd constructed a device based on the data gathered by Tess-1, a machine capable of drawing energy from a cosmic source. All he needed was to get Spider-Man within range, to trap the web-slinger long enough for the extraction to complete. But Doom's scheme was foiled by an unexpected source, a mysterious figure known only as the Lackey, someone who had been subtly sabotaging the Prime Mover's plans throughout the entire conspiracy. This Lackey, whose true identity and motivations remained unclear, damaged the head of Tess-1 before Doom could use it properly, corrupting the data and causing the extraction device to malfunction. When Doom attempted to activate it, expecting to drain Spider-Man's cosmic powers, the machine simply sparked and died, all his careful planning wasted by a single act of sabotage. Doom's rage at this failure was legendary, his fury at being denied the power he sought, adding another layer of tension to the already fractious alliance of villains. The most iconic battle of Spider-Man's cosmic period came when he faced the Grey Hulk, a confrontation that would be remembered and referenced for decades to come. 2. The Grey Hulk was different from the traditional Green Hulk that most people knew. This version, whose transformation Bruce Banner underwent at night rather than when angry, was smarter than his green counterpart, but not quite as strong, retaining more of Banner's intelligence and cunning, but sacrificing some of the raw power that made the Hulk so dangerous. Sebastian Shaw, the leader of the Hellfire Club and a villain normally associated with the X-Men, had hired the Grey Hulk to kill Spider-Man, seeing the web-slinger's new abilities as a potential threat to Shaw's interests. The Grey Hulk approached the job with confidence, having fought Spider-Man before and finding him to be a quick but ultimately outmatched opponent, someone who relied on speed and agility because he lacked the raw strength to match someone like the Hulk. This confrontation would be different, the Grey Hulk believed, because he was being paid extremely well, and professional pride demanded he do the job correctly. Their first encounter happened at night, with the Grey Hulk ambushing Spider-Man in a relatively low-populated area, showing uncharacteristic concern for potential civilian casualties. The Hulk came in swinging, throwing punches that could shatter buildings, expecting to end the fight quickly and collect his payment from Shaw. Instead, Spider-Man blocked the first punch, his hand catching the Hulk's massive fist and stopping it completely. The Hulk felt the impact reverberate through his arm, felt the resistance of genuine power meeting his strength, and for the first time, uncertainty crept into his mind. They traded blows, earth-shattering exchanges of force that cracked pavement and shattered windows from the shock waves. The battle raged through the streets, two incredibly powerful beings testing each other's limits, and gradually, the Grey Hulk realized he wasn't winning. In fact, he might be losing, facing an opponent whose strength seemed to match or even exceed his own. Spider-Man wasn't fighting like the quick, evasive hero the Hulk remembered. He was standing his ground, matching the Hulk punch for punch, demonstrating power that should have been impossible for someone his size. The fight escalated, moving across the city as neither combatant could gain a decisive advantage. Spider-Man fired energy blasts from his eyes, another new ability that caught even him by surprise, laser-like beams of cosmic force that sent the Hulk stumbling backward. The Gray Hulk responded with increased fury, his strength growing as his anger built, the characteristic rage that made the Hulk so dangerous beginning to overwhelm even his more intelligent gray persona. They grappled, two titans locked in a test of pure strength, concrete crumbling beneath their feet from the pressure of their struggle. And then, in a moment that would define Spider-Man's cosmic period more than perhaps any other, Peter decided to end the fight decisively. He channeled all his cosmic power into a single punch, drawing on reserves of energy that made his fist glow with stellar light. When that punch connected with the Gray Hulk's jaw, the impact was like a bomb detonating. The Hulk was launched into the air, not just thrown back, but actually sent flying upward with such tremendous velocity that he broke through the atmosphere itself. Spider-Man stood there, fist still extended, watching in shock as the Hulk became a tiny dot against the night sky, soaring higher and higher until he vanished from sight entirely, hurled into space by the force of that single blow. The image of the Gray Hulk tumbling through space, wondering if this was how he would die, became one of the most memorable panels in comic book history. Todd McFarlane, the artist on that particular issue, drew Spider-Man in poses that deliberately evoked Superman, showing Peter hovering in mid-air with his fist extended, cape flowing behind him from his cosmic aura, projecting an image of absolute power and control. It was a visual statement about how fundamentally Spider-Man had changed, how the cosmic energies had transformed him into something approaching Superman's level of capability. And yet, despite this incredible demonstration of power, despite sending one of the Marvel Universe's strongest beings into orbit, Spider-Man immediately felt remorse. He flew up after the Hulk, racing through the atmosphere to catch him before he could die in the vacuum of space, using his cosmic abilities to survive in airless conditions. He found the Hulk floating helplessly, the gray form already beginning to suffocate, and carefully flew him back to Earth, depositing him gently on solid ground. Even with godlike power at his command, Peter Parker remained fundamentally himself, unwilling to let even an enemy die if he could prevent it. This pattern repeated across multiple issues and storylines, Spider-Man facing threats that would have been impossible for his normal power set to handle, yet emerging victorious each time through the application of his cosmic abilities. Graviton, a villain who controlled gravity itself and normally fought the Avengers, attacked the Daily Bugle building, lifting it into the air to draw Spider-Man out. Graviton was powerful enough to threaten the entire planet if properly motivated, capable of creating crushing gravity wells that could pulverize steel or anti-gravity fields that sent objects flying into space. Against normal Spider-Man, Graviton would have been nearly unbeatable, the gravity manipulator able to pin Peter to the ground or fling him around helplessly. But Cosmic Spider-Man matched Graviton's control over fundamental forces with his own energy manipulation, creating gravitational fields of his own, flying directly into Graviton's attacks and powering through them, ultimately defeating the villain and saving the Daily Bugle staff. The people who worked at the newspaper, who had spent years writing articles questioning whether Spider-Man was a menace, pulled Peter from the rubble after the battle and thanked him sincerely for saving their lives. Yet throughout all these battles, throughout all these demonstrations of incredible power, Peter remained confused about the source of his abilities. He knew something had changed fundamentally after the laboratory accident, but he still believed these were mutations or evolutions of his existing spider powers, rather than recognizing them as something entirely separate. The cosmic awareness that should have come with the Enigma Force remained blocked, that crucial understanding of what was happening and why denied to him because of the unusual circumstances of the power transfer. He could feel the energy inside him, could sense it responding to his will, could channel it into various applications, but he had no context for understanding what it really meant. This confusion affected him on multiple levels, straining his relationship with Mary Jane as she saw her husband become someone increasingly alien, someone who flew through space and shot energy from his hands, someone who seemed less human with each passing day. Peter himself struggled with the implications of his new abilities, wondering if he was still Peter Parker beneath all this power, or if the cosmic energies were changing him into something else entirely. The public's reaction to Cosmic Spider-Man was complex and often negative, despite the good he was doing. New Yorkers had grown accustomed to their friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, the wise-cracking hero who swung through the city on webs and helped people at the street level. This new version, who could fly, who shot energy beams, who seemed to possess nearly unlimited power, frightened them. When Spider-Man declared himself a menace in a moment of frustration and self-doubt, when he unleashed his full power in ways that caused massive property damage, people believed him. They saw someone who had become too powerful, too far removed from humanity to be truly trusted. The very abilities that allowed Spider-Man to save more lives than ever before also made him seem less approachable, more dangerous, a potential threat rather than a guaranteed protector. J. Jonah Jameson, never one to miss an opportunity to criticize Spider-Man, had a field day with this new development, running editorials about how Spider-Man's increased power only made him a greater menace to the city. Behind the scenes, Dr. Doom's repeated attempts to steal Spider-Man's cosmic abilities grew increasingly desperate. Each failure made Doom more obsessed, more determined to succeed where he'd failed before. He sent multiple villains, commissioned various devices, analyzed endless data streams, all in pursuit of that elusive cosmic power. But every scheme was thwarted, either by Spider-Man himself, by the mysterious lackey who kept sabotaging the Prime Mover's plans, or simply by the nature of the Enigma Force itself, resisting external manipulation. Doom came. To understand that whatever power Spider-Man wielded, it was fundamentally different from other cosmic forces he'd encountered before. It wasn't the power cosmic that Galactus's heralds used, wasn't the magical energies of the mystic arts, wasn't the reality-warping abilities of beings like the Beyonder. This was something unique, something that seemed to have a will of its own, and that realization only made Doom want it more. The Acts of Vengeance conspiracy, meanwhile, was falling apart around Loki. The alliance of villains he'd so carefully constructed proved unstable, their egos and conflicting agendas causing constant friction. Magneto had abandoned the conspiracy entirely after his confrontation with the Red Skull, refusing to work alongside Nazis regardless of what strategic advantages it might offer. Dr. Doom's obsession with stealing Spider-Man's powers distracted him from the broader goals of the conspiracy. Kingpin was pursuing his own criminal empire objectives. The Mandarin had returned to China with his own schemes in mind. What had begun as a coordinated assault on Earth's heroes had devolved into scattered attacks with no central coordination, individual villains pursuing personal vendettas rather than following any master plan. Loki watched his grand conspiracy crumble with mounting frustration, his anger at Earth's heroes intensifying with each failure. The god of mischief had been certain this plan would succeed, that overwhelming heroes with unexpected threats would finally bring them down. Instead, the heroes adapted, overcame the challenges, and emerged arguably stronger than before. But Loki was not one to accept defeat gracefully, and his hatred for Earth's champions, particularly Spider-Man, who had become a symbol of the conspiracy's failure, demanded satisfaction. If the indirect approach wouldn't work, if manipulating villains to do his bidding proved insufficient, then Loki would take direct action. He would create a threat so overwhelming, so catastrophically dangerous, that even this cosmically empowered Spider-Man couldn't possibly survive. And so, Loki turned his divine attention to the Tri-Sentinel, a weapon of apocalyptic proportions that had been gathering dust after previous battles. The Tri-Sentinel was not a single Sentinel robot, but three of the massive mutant hunting machines combined into one enormous construct. Each individual Sentinel was already a formidable threat, standing several stories tall, armed with advanced weaponry, and programmed to hunt and destroy mutants with ruthless efficiency. Together, merged into a single entity, the Tri-Sentinel was exponentially more dangerous. It possessed 3 times the armor, 3 times the firepower, 3 times the processing power, making it one of the most dangerous robotic weapons ever created. Loki's enhancement of the Tri-Sentinel pushed it beyond even those formidable capabilities. Using his godly powers, his mastery of magic and technology, combined, Loki upgraded every system in the mechanical monster. He increased its physical strength to levels that allowed it to tear through buildings like tissue paper, reinforced its armor until conventional weapons would be utterly useless against it, installed energy weapons capable of leveling city blocks with single blasts. The sensory systems were upgraded to track targets across entire continents, the processing cores enhanced to make tactical decisions with superhuman speed, the power plant boosted to provide seemingly unlimited energy for sustained combat operations. And then, in an act of pure malevolence that demonstrated how deep Loki's hatred ran, he equipped the Tri-Sentinel with a nuclear payload. Not a small tactical nuclear device, but a full-scale thermonuclear warhead, a bomb capable of devastating an entire metropolitan area, of killing millions in a single detonation. The plan was simple and ruthlessly effective in its cruelty. The Tri-Sentinel would attack New York City, and if anyone attempted to stop it, if Spider-Man or any other hero tried to intervene, the robot would detonate its nuclear core, sacrificing itself to take the hero and most of Manhattan with it. Loki programmed the Tri-Sentinel with specific targeting parameters, making Spider-Man its primary objective while ensuring it would cause maximum collateral damage in the process of hunting him down. The robot was instructed to rampage through population centers, to threaten as many civilian lives as possible, to force Spider-Man into a situation where he'd have no choice but to confront it directly. And the nuclear failsafe meant any confrontation would be suicide. Either Spider-Man would try to fight the Tri-Sentinel and trigger its detonation, or he'd try to flee and allow it to destroy the city searching for him. It was a no-win scenario, a trap designed with intimate knowledge of Peter Parker's character, exploiting his heroic nature and sense of responsibility. Loki knew Spider-Man would never abandon the city to save himself, knew Peter would sacrifice his own life to protect innocent people, and the god of mischief planned to make that sacrifice as painful and devastating as possible. When the Tri-Sentinel activated, rising from its storage facility and beginning its march toward New York City, Loki watched with satisfaction, certain that this time, finally, his revenge against Earth's heroes would be complete. The Tri-Sentinel's appearance in New York caused immediate panic throughout the city. People recognized the distinctive design of Sentinel robots, knew them as weapons used to hunt mutants, and the sight of three merged together into a single titanic construct inspired visceral terror. This thing was massive beyond comprehension, each step shaking the ground like a localized earthquake, each movement of its arms capable of demolishing buildings. The robot began its rampage methodically, crushing cars beneath its feet, smashing through structures. As it searched for Spider-Man, its scanners sweeping across the city for any sign of its target. Emergency services were mobilized immediately, but conventional military forces would be useless against something this powerful. The police evacuated areas in the Tri-Sentinel's path, trying desperately to move civilians out of danger zones before the robot arrived. News helicopters circled at what they hoped was a safe distance, broadcasting live footage of the metallic monster stalking through Manhattan. The whole world watched in horror as the Tri-Sentinel methodically destroyed everything in its path. Knowing that someone would have to stop it, praying that someone could, Spider-Man, of course, responded immediately to the crisis, swinging through the city toward the sounds of destruction and the panicked screams of fleeing civilians. When he first laid eyes on the Tri-Sentinel, even with his cosmic powers, even having faced the Hulk and Magneto and countless other threats, Peter felt a moment of genuine fear. This thing was enormous, far larger than anything he'd fought before, its three heads tracking different targets simultaneously, its multiple arms wielding weapons that glowed with deadly energy. The destructive power it represented was staggering, and Peter's enhanced spider sense screamed danger at him from multiple directions at once, the Tri-Sentinel registering as dozens of separate threats all merged into one unstoppable killing machine. But people were dying. Buildings were collapsing, and the robot would continue its rampage until someone stopped it. Peter pushed his fear aside, remembered that he had cosmic power now, abilities that let him punch the Hulk into orbit, and launched himself into battle against the Tri-Sentinel with everything he had. The fight was immediately, catastrophically one-sided, and not in Spider-Man's favor. Peter hit the Tri-Sentinel with energy blasts that had demolished other opponents, cosmic force that should have been capable of tearing through metal and circuitry, but the robot's enhanced armor absorbed the impacts with minimal damage. Its multiple heads tracked Spider-Man's movements with inhuman precision, compensating for each other's blind spots, making it nearly impossible for Peter to find an advantageous angle of attack. When the Tri-Sentinel struck back, its blows carried enough force to level buildings, and even Spider-Man's enhanced durability couldn't fully protect him from impacts that powerful. He was sent flying through the air repeatedly, crashing through walls and pavement, each hit driving home how overmatched he truly was. The cosmic powers that had made him nearly invincible against other opponents seemed inadequate against this particular threat, and Peter realized with growing horror that he might not be able to win this fight. Every attack he launched was ineffective, every defensive maneuver barely sufficient to keep him alive, and the Tri-Sentinel wasn't slowing down, wasn't taking damage, wasn't showing any signs of being affected by anything he threw at it. Then, the Tri-Sentinel spoke, its voice booming across the battlefield through external speakers, and the words it broadcast made Peter's blood run cold. The robot announced that it carried a nuclear payload, a bomb with sufficient yield to destroy all of Manhattan and much of the surrounding area. If it was damaged beyond repair, if its structural integrity fell below critical thresholds, the nuclear device would automatically detonate, killing everyone within miles of the blast zone. The Tri-Sentinel's programming allowed it to explain this calmly, factually, making sure Spider-Man understood exactly what he was facing. Any attack powerful enough to truly damage the robot would trigger the failsafe. Any attempt to disarm the nuclear device directly would cause it to detonate immediately. The Tri-Sentinel was effectively invincible through mutually assured destruction, and Spider-Man's options had just narrowed to either letting it rampage unopposed or dying along with millions of innocent people in a nuclear explosion. Loki's trap was perfect. An impossible situation with no good solutions, designed specifically to break Spider-Man's spirit before killing him. Peter stood there, costume torn, body aching from the punishment he'd already endured, and felt despair wash over him. How could he fight something like this? How could he protect the city when any attack that might work would cause catastrophic destruction? His mind raced through possibilities, searching desperately for some solution, some clever tactic that would let him disable the Tri-Sentinel without triggering its nuclear core. He considered trying to web up the robot, using his cosmic powers to create restraints strong enough to immobilize it. But the Tri-Sentinel's strength would tear through webbing, and the struggle might damage it enough to trigger the detonation anyway. He thought about evacuating the city, getting everyone away from the immediate blast zone, but there wasn't enough time, and the Tri-Sentinel was programmed to follow him wherever he went, bringing its nuclear payload into whatever population center he fled toward. Every option he examined led to the same conclusion. People were going to die, and there was nothing he could do to prevent it. The weight of that realization, the understanding that his cosmic powers weren't enough to save everyone, crushed Peter more thoroughly than any physical blow the Tri-Sentinel had landed. But in that moment of despair, as Peter prepared to make whatever final stand he could, something changed. The cosmic power inside him, the Enigma Force that had remained partially dormant and blocked throughout this entire ordeal, suddenly surged in response to his emotional state. Peter's desperation, his absolute commitment to saving lives no matter the personal cost, his willingness to sacrifice everything to protect innocent people, these qualities resonated with the Enigma Force itself. The cosmic entity recognized in Peter Parker the exact characteristics it sought in its champions, the fundamental heroism and selflessness that made someone worthy of wielding ultimate power. The blockage that had prevented full connection since the laboratory accident finally dissolved, and the Enigma Force merged completely with Peter's consciousness. In an instant, cosmic awareness flooded through his mind, revealing truths about the universe, about the power he wielded, about his own potential. He finally understood what had happened to him, why he'd gained these abilities, what they truly represented. He wasn't just Peter Parker who'd been exposed to some random energy source. He was Captain Universe, chosen champion of the Enigma Force, bearer of the Uni-Power. The transformation was visible and dramatic. Peter's traditional red and blue Spider-Man costume began to shift, cosmic energy flowing across the fabric like liquid starlight. The colors deepened and changed, becoming darker, more cosmic in appearance. His chest emblem transformed, the spider symbol merging with a starburst pattern that marked him as Captain Universe. Energy crackled around his body in visible waves, his entire form seeming to glow with inner light. When he moved, reality itself seemed to bend slightly around him, space distorting in response to his presence. His eyes began to glow with white light, seeing beyond the visible spectrum into dimensions of reality that normal humans couldn't perceive. The Tri-Sentinel, recognizing the change in its opponent, recalculated threat assessments, its sensors detecting power signatures that exceeded its ability to measure accurately. Peter Parker, fully awakened as Captain Universe, had become something that approached a god in terms of raw capability, and the battle was about to shift dramatically. With cosmic awareness guiding his actions, Peter now understood the Tri-Sentinel at a fundamental level. He could see the energy flowing through its systems, map its internal structure, identify the location and nature of its nuclear payload. More importantly, he understood how to dismantle it safely, how to apply his cosmic powers with precision rather than raw force, how to achieve victory without triggering the nuclear failsafe. Sebastian Shaw, watching the battle from a distance, had installed a device in the Tri-Sentinel designed to analyze and steal Spider-Man's powers, continuing Dr. Doom's obsession with acquiring cosmic abilities. But Shaw had also inadvertently created the solution to the nuclear problem. His device, when properly manipulated, could be used to absorb and neutralize the energy from the robot systems. Peter, operating on instinct guided by cosmic awareness, knew exactly what to do. He flew directly at the Tri-Sentinel, no longer dodging or evading, but moving with absolute certainty of purpose. His hands glowed with cosmic energy as he phased them through the robot's armor, reaching inside to the power core, to Shaw's absorption device, to the intricate network of systems that kept the mechanical monster functioning. The Tri-Sentinel tried to respond, all three heads targeting Spider-Man simultaneously, weapons charging for a coordinated strike that should have obliterated him. But Captain Universe was operating at a level far beyond what the robot could match. Peter's cosmic powers allowed him to perceive time differently, to react at speeds that made the Tri-Sentinel's attack seem to move in slow motion. He manipulated Shaw's device, using it as a conduit for his cosmic energies, channeling power through it in patterns that shouldn't have been possible. The device began absorbing energy from the Tri-Sentinel systems, draining power from its weapons, its sensors, its structural supports, but doing so in carefully controlled ways that prevented catastrophic failures. Peter essentially rewired the entire robot on the fly, rerouting power flows, shutting down dangerous systems, carefully disarming the nuclear payload one component at a time. The precision required was extraordinary, like performing brain surgery while fighting for his life. But cosmic awareness guided each action perfectly. The Tri-Sentinel's attacks grew weaker as its power was drained, movements becoming sluggish, weapons firing with less intensity, until finally the massive construct simply stopped moving, all its systems shut down completely, rendered utterly inert. Peter carefully removed the nuclear device, carrying it high into the atmosphere where it could be safely contained, using his cosmic powers to stabilize the weapon and ensure it wouldn't accidentally detonate. When he returned to the city, depositing the disarmed Tri-Sentinel in a location where it could be properly dismantled, the crowds that had been watching the battle erupted in cheers. They'd witnessed something extraordinary, seen their hero facing impossible odds and emerging victorious through a combination of power and ingenuity that left them in awe. Spider-Man had saved millions of lives, prevented a nuclear catastrophe, defeated a threat that should have been utterly beyond his capabilities. The people of New York, who had been afraid of Cosmic Spider-Man, who had questioned whether he could still be trusted with such power, now saw him as their greatest protector. The Tri-Sentinel battle became legendary, the moment when Spider-Man proved that despite his godlike abilities, despite powers that made him seem almost alien, he was still fundamentally the hero they'd always known, still willing to sacrifice everything to protect innocent people. But the victory came with a cost that Peter hadn't anticipated, one that would define the final chapter of his time as Captain Universe. In defeating the Tri-Sentinel, in channeling so much cosmic energy through Shaw's absorption device, Peter had destabilized his connection to the Enigma Force. The power that had made him nearly invincible, that had allowed him to fly and shoot energy and match the Hulk in strength, began to fade. He could feel it leaving him, the cosmic awareness withdrawing, the incredible abilities that had defined him for weeks, slowly draining away like water through his fingers. Peter tried to hold on to it, tried to maintain that connection to the Enigma Force, but the entity's purpose had been fulfilled. The Tri-Sentinel, the threat that had prompted the Enigma Force to bond with Peter in the first place, had been defeated. The crisis was over, and the Enigma Force, following its ancient patterns, was ready to move on to another champion, another crisis, another time and place where cosmic power would be needed. Peter felt the loss acutely, not because he craved power for its own sake, but because he'd become accustomed to the capabilities it provided, to the lives he could save with abilities that went beyond his normal spider powers. The Enigma Force didn't leave all at once. The departure was gradual, taking place over days, Peter's cosmic abilities diminishing incrementally as the entity withdrew. His flight capabilities were the first to go, leaving him dependent once again on web-swinging for movement through the city. The energy blasts faded next, his hands no longer crackling with cosmic force. His enhanced strength decreased back toward his normal spider power levels, still superhuman by any standard but nowhere near the godlike might he'd briefly possessed. The cosmic awareness, that incredible perception that had allowed him to understand the universe itself, withdrew last of all, leaving Peter feeling almost blind by comparison to what he'd experienced. His costume reverted to its traditional red and blue colors, the Captain Universe emblem disappearing as if it had never existed. Within a week of defeating the Tri-Sentinel, Peter Parker was simply Spider-Man again. His brief time as a cosmic being concluded, his powers returned to their familiar baseline. And surprisingly, more than anything else, Peter felt relieved. The cosmic powers had been incredible, had allowed him to accomplish things he'd never dreamed possible, but they had also been overwhelming, frightening in their implications, making him question his own humanity. Mary Jane noticed the change immediately, saw her husband returning to something closer to his normal self, and the relief in her eyes matched Peter's own feelings. She'd supported him throughout the cosmic power period, had stood by him even when he seemed to be becoming something alien and distant, but she'd been worried about what those abilities might ultimately do to the man she loved. Having Peter back to his regular self, still Spider-Man but not a god, felt like getting her husband back from a journey to places she couldn't follow. They talked about the experience, Peter describing what it had been like to wield cosmic power, to have awareness that stretched across dimensions, to possess abilities that made him feel invincible. He admitted that the power had been seductive, that part of him had enjoyed being that strong, that capable, that free from the normal limitations of his spider powers. But he also acknowledged that the responsibility had been crushing, that knowing he possessed power to reshape reality brought with it a burden that went beyond anything he'd experienced before. With great power came great responsibility. Uncle Ben's lesson and cosmic power brought cosmic responsibility, expectations, and obligations that Peter wasn't sure he wanted to carry. The Acts of Vengeance conspiracy completely collapsed in the aftermath of the Tri-Sentinel's defeat. Loki, furious at yet another failure, at seeing his perfect trap overcome by the very hero he'd sought to destroy, abandoned his schemes and retreated to lick his wounds. The prime movers disbanded, the villains returning to their individual pursuits, the brief alliance of evil dissolving as quickly as it had formed. Some villains were captured during the chaos, others escaped to fight another day, but the coordinated threat was over. Earth's heroes had survived the conspiracy, adapted to fighting enemies they'd never faced before, and emerged arguably stronger for the experience. Spider-Man, despite losing his cosmic powers, had gained something more valuable. The knowledge that when faced with impossible situations, when given abilities beyond imagination, he remained true to his core principles. He'd used godlike power not for personal gain, but to protect others, had sacrificed those abilities when necessary to save lives, had proven that Peter Parker's character was stronger than any cosmic enhancement. In the months and years that followed, Peter would occasionally wonder what might have happened if he'd kept the cosmic powers, if the Enigma Force had bonded with him permanently rather than temporarily. Would he have continued being street-level Spider-Man, or would cosmic awareness have pushed him toward larger, more universe-threatening conflicts? Would he have lost touch with humanity, become so powerful that he couldn't relate to normal people anymore? Would the responsibility of wielding such power have eventually crushed him under its weight? These questions had no answers, but Peter suspected he'd made the right choice in letting the powers go, in returning to his familiar role as the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. The cosmic abilities had been amazing, but they'd never truly felt like his, never seemed to fit with who Peter Parker was at his core. His spider powers, the abilities that had defined him since that fateful radioactive spider bite, felt right in ways the cosmic powers never had. They were appropriate to his role, to his mission, to the kind of hero he wanted to be. The story of Cosmic Spider-Man, of Peter Parker's time as Captain Universe, became one of the most discussed periods in the character's publication history. Fans debated whether the power boost had been too much, whether making Spider-Man cosmic level had violated the essential nature of the character. Some argued that Spider-Man worked best as a street-level hero, that his appeal came from being relatable, from struggling with everyday problems while also fighting supervillains, and that cosmic powers removed him too far from that core concept. Others loved seeing Spider-Man elevated to such incredible heights, enjoyed watching him face threats normally reserved for the Avengers or Fantastic Four, appreciated the exploration of what Peter would do with nearly unlimited power. The Todd McFarlane artwork during this period, particularly the iconic image of Spider-Man punching the Hulk into orbit, became some of the most reproduced and celebrated Spider-Man art ever created. Those issues became collector's items, sought after for their combination of memorable storytelling and spectacular visuals. But the story of Spider-Man's cosmic transformation didn't end with Peter losing the Enigma Force in the main Marvel continuity. The concept was too compelling, the possibilities too rich, to remain confined to a single storyline. In the vast multiverse of Marvel Comics, where every possible variation of every character exists somewhere across infinite realities, there existed a version of Peter Parker who never lost the cosmic powers, who remained bonded with the Enigma Force permanently. This was the Spider-Man of Earth-13, a reality where everything about the cosmic power story played out differently, where Peter kept his abilities and became perhaps the single most powerful Spider-Man in the entire multiverse. Earth-13. Peter Parker wasn't just Captain Universe temporarily, he was Captain Universe as his default state. Cosmic powers merged with spider abilities to create a hero whose capabilities defied easy categorization. He possessed all the traditional spider powers, the strength, speed, agility, wall crawling, and spider sense that defined any Spider-Man, but amplified to cosmic levels and supplemented by abilities that let him manipulate reality itself. Earth-13. Spider-Man became a protector not just of New York or Earth, but of his entire universe, facing threats that would destroy whole galaxies if left unchecked. He could fly through space unaided, survive in environments that would kill normal beings instantly, perceive threats across vast cosmic distances, and deploy power sufficient to challenge beings like Galactus or the Celestials. His costume remained the distinctive Captain Universe design, the cosmic emblem on his chest marking him as something more than an ordinary Spider-Man, and his presence commanded respect even from other cosmic-level entities. Where the mainstream Peter Parker had struggled with the burden of cosmic power, Earth-13. Peter had found ways to integrate those abilities into his identity to remain true to Spider-Man's core principles while operating on a scale that most heroes couldn't comprehend. He was still witty, still used humor to deflect tension, still cared deeply about protecting innocent people, but he did these things while wielding abilities that could reshape reality at will. The importance of Earth-13 Spider-Man wouldn't become apparent until much later, during events that threatened the entire multiverse itself. The Spider-Verse crossover event brought together spider people from across infinite realities, assembling an army of Spider-Men and Spider-Women to combat a threat that specifically targeted spider-powered heroes. This threat came in the form of the Inheritors, a family of immortal energy vampires who fed on the life force of totemic beings, with spider totems being their preferred prey. The Inheritors had been hunting spider people across the multiverse for generations, killing countless versions of Peter Parker, Miles Morales, Spider-Gwen, and every other spider hero they could find. They were ancient, powerful, and seemingly unkillable, possessing abilities that let them jump between realities at will, hunting their prey across infinite dimensions. Each member of the Inheritor family was formidable, capable of killing most spider people with minimal effort, but their leader Solace was in a category all his own, a being of such tremendous power that he could slaughter entire teams of spider heroes without breaking stride. Solace was the patriarch of the Inheritor family, the oldest and strongest of them all, a creature who had been consuming totemic life force since before recorded human history. His power dwarfed that of his children, already dangerous foes in their own right, and he'd never been seriously challenged in all his millennia of existence. Solace could shrug off attacks from multiple spider people simultaneously, could kill with casual gestures, could perceive threats across dimensional barriers, making him nearly impossible to surprise or ambush. When the assembled spider army learned that Solace was personally joining the hunt, when they realized they'd have to face the patriarch himself, despair settled over many of them. How could they fight something that powerful? How could they hope to stop a being who'd been killing spider people across countless realities for longer than human civilization had existed? The answer came from Earth-13, from the Spider-Man who had kept his cosmic powers, from Peter Parker who wielded the Enigma Force as naturally as breathing. Earth-13. Spider-Man's confrontation with Solace became one of the defining moments of the Spider-Verse event, a battle between two beings operating at cosmic levels while the fate of all spider people hung in the balance. Solace had expected another easy kill, another spider totem to drain and consume, another brief moment of satisfaction before moving on to the next victim. Instead, he found himself facing a Spider-Man whose power rivaled his own, whose cosmic abilities made him dangerous, even to an immortal energy vampire. The battle raged across multiple realities, two titans of impossible, might-trading blows that shattered dimensional barriers and reshaped local space-time. Earth-13. Spider-Man demonstrated why he was considered the most powerful spider hero in the multiverse, matching Solace strike for strike. Cosmic energy against primal hunger, the Enigma Force's protective instincts clashing with the Inheritor's predatory nature. For the first time in his ancient existence, Solace faced an opponent who could truly challenge him, and the realization seemed to fill the Inheritor Patriarch with something approaching respect or perhaps fear. But even cosmic power has limits. Even Captain Universe can be overwhelmed by sufficient force, and Solace had been perfecting his abilities for thousands of years. The battle turned against Earth-13. Spider-Man gradually, the Inheritor's experience and ruthlessness giving him advantages that raw power couldn't overcome. Solace began landing more hits, his energy-draining attacks bypassing cosmic defenses, his claws tearing through matter and energy alike. Earth-13. Spider-Man fought with everything he had, channeling the full might of the Enigma Force, pushing his cosmic abilities to their absolute limits. But it wasn't enough. Solace was simply too powerful, too experienced, too utterly merciless to be defeated by a single opponent, even one as mighty as Cosmic Spider-Man. In the end, Earth-13 Peter Parker fell, his life force drained by the Inheritor Patriarch, his cosmic powers unable to save him from a being who had been killing gods since before humanity existed. The death of Earth-13 Spider-Man sent shockwaves through the assembled spider army, demonstrating that even their most powerful member couldn't stand against Solace alone, that defeating the Inheritors would require something more than individual strength. The loss of Earth-13 Spider-Man was mourned deeply by the other spider heroes who'd known him, who'd witnessed his power and heroism, who'd hoped he might be the key to defeating the Inheritors. His sacrifice wasn't meaningless, however, as his battle with Solus provided crucial information about the Inheritor Patriarch's abilities and weaknesses, intelligence that would later prove vital in developing strategies to combat the family. The memory of cosmic Spider-Man standing alone against an impossible foe, fighting to buy time for other spider people to escape, using his cosmic powers not for personal glory, but to protect others, embodied everything that made Spider-Man heroic across all realities. Earth 13. Peter Parker had wielded godlike power, had become perhaps the strongest Spider-Man in existence, but in his final moments he was still fundamentally Spider-Man, still willing to sacrifice himself for others, still believing that with great power came great responsibility. His death proved that courage and heroism weren't about how much power you wielded, but about what you chose to do with that power, about standing up for what was right, even when facing impossible odds. The Spider-Verse event eventually concluded with the defeat of the Inheritors, the spider heroes across the multiverse working together to find ways to combat enemies that no single spider person could beat alone. Earth 13. Spider-Man's sacrifice contributed to that victory, his battle providing insights and buying time that helped others survive. But the consequences of the Inheritors' rampage extended beyond the initial conflict, setting up future threats and complications that would require continued cooperation between spider heroes from different realities. The follow-up event, Spider-Geddon, explored some of these lingering consequences, bringing back some of the Inheritors and forcing new generations of spider heroes to confront threats they'd hoped were permanently vanquished. During Spider-Geddon, Miles Morales, the ultimate Spider-Man who had replaced Peter Parker in his universe, found himself dealing with problems that stemmed directly from the earlier conflict with the Inheritors. Miles's involvement in Spider-Geddon demonstrated how the legacy of Cosmic Spider-Man extended beyond Earth 13, how the battles fought during Spider-Verse had implications for every spider hero across the multiverse. The younger hero faced challenges that tested not just his physical abilities, but his character, his willingness to make hard choices in impossible situations, his capacity to bear the weight of responsibility that came with being Spider-Man. In many ways, Miles's journey paralleled what Peter Parker had experienced during the Acts of Vengeance period, facing overwhelming threats and questioning whether he had what it took to overcome them. The difference was that Miles didn't have cosmic powers to rely on, didn't possess the Enigma Force's backing, had to succeed through determination, cleverness, and the support of other spider heroes rather than overwhelming might. His success demonstrated that Spider-Man's true power came not from cosmic energies or enhanced abilities, but from the refusal to give up, from the commitment to doing what was right, regardless of personal cost. Looking back across decades of Spider-Man stories, across the mainstream continuity and countless alternate universes, the cosmic power period stands out as a unique exploration of what Peter Parker would do with nearly unlimited ability. It wasn't the first time Spider-Man had received power boosts. There had been other storylines where his abilities were temporarily enhanced or where he gained additional powers. But the Acts of Vengeance cosmic transformation was different because of its scale, because it elevated Peter to a level where he could challenge the strongest beings in the Marvel Universe, where he operated on a cosmic stage normally reserved for characters like the Silver Surfer or Thor. The storyline asked fundamental questions about Spider-Man's character and found that even with godlike power, Peter Parker remained recognizably himself, remained committed to the principles that defined him as a hero. He didn't seek domination or worship despite having abilities that could have made him a god king. He didn't abandon his responsibility to protect ordinary people despite being capable of dealing with cosmic threats. He remained Spider-Man at his core, and when the cosmic powers were no longer needed, he let them go without regret. The artistic contributions to this era deserve particular recognition, especially Todd McFarlane's work, which brought a distinctive visual style to Spider-Man that influenced comic book art for decades afterward. McFarlane's Spider-Man was all about fluid motion and dramatic poses, webs drawn with intricate detail that made them look three-dimensional, figures arranged in dynamic compositions that practically leaped off the page. His depiction of Cosmic Spider-Man captured the awesome scope of the power Peter wielded while maintaining the character's essential humanity and personality. The image of Spider-Man hovering in mid-air after punching the Hulk into orbit, cape flowing, body language conveying both power and uncertainty, became an iconic representation not just of this particular storyline, but of Spider-Man as a concept. McFarlane understood how to balance spectacle with character, how to make readers feel the weight of cosmic power while never losing sight of the person beneath the costume. The writing during this period, primarily by David Michelinie, managed the difficult task of keeping Spider-Man grounded and relatable, even while dealing with cosmic-scale threats. The scripts acknowledged Peter's confusion about his powers, his struggles to understand what was happening to him, his concerns about how these abilities were changing him as a person. Rather than simply having Peter instantly master cosmic powers and become effortlessly heroic, the stories showed him learning, adapting, making mistakes, struggling with moral and practical questions that had no easy answers. When Peter declared himself a menace, when he questioned whether someone with his power could be trusted, when he worried about losing touch with his humanity, these weren't just dramatic poses or angsty moments for their own sake. They were genuine explorations of what it would mean for an ordinary person, even an extraordinary ordinary person like Peter Parker, to suddenly possess abilities that made him effectively a god. The resolution, where Peter ultimately used his cosmic powers selflessly and then let them go without clinging to what they represented, felt earned precisely because the journey there had been portrayed with such thoughtfulness and attention to character. The influence of Cosmic Spider-Man extended far beyond the original storyline, appearing in various forms of media and inspiring countless stories across different platforms. Video games featuring Spider-Man sometimes included cosmic power upgrades or references to the Captain Universe period, allowing players to experience the fantasy of wielding such incredible abilities. Animated series occasionally adapted elements of the story, though usually modified to fit their particular continuities and storytelling needs. Comic writers returned to the concept repeatedly, finding new angles to explore, new threats that might require Spider-Man to regain cosmic powers temporarily, new ways to examine what unlimited power meant when wielded by someone fundamentally decent and responsible. The Earth-13 Spider-Man became a recurring presence in multiverse storylines, his cosmic-powered status making him a useful character for dealing with reality-threatening crises. Each appearance added new dimensions to the concept, explored different aspects of what it meant to be a cosmically empowered Spider-Man. Fans of Spider-Man continued to debate whether the cosmic power period was good for the character or represented a deviation from what makes Spider-Man work as a concept. Those who appreciate it point to the exploration of power and responsibility taken to its logical extreme, the opportunity to see Spider-Man interact with cosmic-level characters and threats, the stunning artwork that defined the era, and the character moments where Peter proved his essential decency even when wielding godlike abilities. Critics argue that it took Spider-Man too far from his roots as a street-level hero, that the appeal of the character lies in his relatability and his struggles with everyday problems alongside superhero battles, and that cosmic powers removed the fundamental tension that makes Spider-Man stories compelling. Both perspectives have merit, and the fact that the storyline continues generating passionate discussion decades after publication demonstrates its lasting impact on Spider-Man's mythology. The cosmic power period also raised interesting questions about the nature of heroism itself, questions that extended beyond Spider-Man into broader discussions about superhero narratives. If a hero gains unlimited power, what prevents them from becoming a tyrant? If someone possesses abilities that make them essentially omnipotent within their sphere of operation, what motivates them to continue following laws and respecting the rights of ordinary people? The answer, at least in Peter Parker's case, was character, the fundamental decency and moral compass that defined who he was regardless of his power level. Uncle Ben's lesson about great power and great responsibility wasn't just about having spider powers or cosmic abilities. It was about recognizing that any advantage, any capability that elevated you above others, came with an obligation to use it responsibly and ethically. Peter internalized that lesson so deeply that even when he possessed power that could have let him rule the world, even when he could have reshaped reality to suit his preferences, he chose instead to protect people and then surrender abilities he no longer needed. That choice said more about Spider-Man's character than any number of villain defeats or heroic speeches could have conveyed. The Enigma Force itself became a more prominent part of Marvel lore following Spider-Man's time as Captain Universe, with subsequent stories exploring its nature, origins, and the other champions it had chosen throughout history. The entity's sentience and selectivity in choosing hosts raised questions about its motivations and goals. Why did it choose Peter Parker specifically during the Acts of Vengeance period? Was it responding to the Tri-Sentinel threat that Loki would eventually create, or were there other factors at play? The laboratory accident that exposed Peter to the Enigma Force seemed coincidental, but cosmic entities of such power rarely left things to pure chance. Some stories suggested the Enigma Force had been subtly guiding events, ensuring it would bond with someone worthy when a major threat emerged. Others portrayed it as more reactive, responding to crises as they developed, rather than anticipating them in advance. The ambiguity about the Enigma Force's true nature and motivations added depth to the cosmic power storyline, suggesting layers of meaning and purpose beyond what was immediately visible. Other heroes had been chosen as Captain Universe over the years, both before and after Peter Parker's tenure, each bringing their own perspective and abilities to the role. Some Captain Universe hosts had been ordinary people with no prior powers, suddenly elevated to cosmic status, and then returned to normalcy once their task was complete. Others had been existing superheroes like Spider-Man, their powers amplified by the Enigma Force for specific purposes. A few had been villains or morally ambiguous individuals, chosen not for their heroism, but because they happened to be in the right place at the right time to address a particular threat. Each Captain Universe story explored different aspects of what it meant to wield cosmic power temporarily, to be chosen for a purpose larger than oneself, to then return to ordinary life once that purpose was fulfilled. Peter Parker's experience as Captain Universe was unique in many ways, particularly in how long the powers remained blocked from his full awareness, but it shared common themes with other Captain Universe narratives about responsibility, sacrifice, and the temporary nature of ultimate power. The Acts of Vengeance crossover itself, beyond Spider-Man's cosmic adventures, had lasting implications for the Marvel Universe. The villain swap concept, while ultimately unsuccessful in destroying Earth's heroes, demonstrated how effective coordination between villains could be when properly organized. Future crossover events would revisit similar themes, exploring what happened when villains worked together instead of pursuing individual agendas. The conspiracy also highlighted vulnerabilities in how heroes operated, showing that their reliance on familiarity with specific enemies could be exploited. Some heroes took lessons from the Acts of Vengeance, broadening their training and preparation to handle unexpected threats, developing contingency plans for facing enemies they'd never encountered before. The event forced heroes to grow and adapt, pushing them beyond comfortable patterns into situations where experience and preparation had to be supplemented with creativity and quick thinking. Loki's role as the mastermind behind Acts of Vengeance added another layer to his ongoing characterization as Marvel's premier trickster villain. The god of mischief had always been defined by his preference for manipulation over direct confrontation, for schemes and plots rather than straightforward battles. Acts of Vengeance represented perhaps his most ambitious plan to date, an attempt to orchestrate the destruction of all Earth's heroes through carefully coordinated attacks. The conspiracy's failure reinforced certain truths about Loki's character. He was brilliant at creating chaos, but less skilled at maintaining control once events were in motion, his schemes often undermined by his inability to account for the unpredictable nature of free will and individual choice. The heroes didn't defeat Acts of Vengeance through superior power or planning, but through adaptability and determination, qualities that Loki consistently underestimated. His specific focus on Spider-Man during the later stages of the conspiracy, culminating in the Tri-Sentinel attack, revealed how personally Loki took these defeats, how his pride demanded revenge even when strategic thinking might have suggested different approaches. The Tri-Sentinel itself became an iconic piece of Marvel technology, representing the dangers of combining existing weapon systems into something exponentially more dangerous. The three Sentinels that formed its base components had each been formidable individually, capable of hunting and capturing mutants with ruthless efficiency. Merged together and enhanced by Loki's magic and technology, the Tri-Sentinel transcended its original programming to become a threat that could challenge almost any hero or team. The nuclear payload Loki added transformed it from a dangerous weapon into an apocalyptic threat, the kind of no-win scenario that tested heroes at their deepest levels. Spider-Man's defeat of the Tri-Sentinel without triggering its nuclear failsafe represented perhaps his greatest single achievement during the cosmic power period, a victory that required not just raw power, but precision, understanding, and willingness to risk everything. The image of the deactivated Tri-Sentinel standing silent in the aftermath, its nuclear threat neutralized, its systems shut down by cosmic Spider-Man's intervention, became a powerful symbol of how ultimate power could be wielded responsibly when in the right hands. Dr. Doom's obsession with stealing Spider-Man's cosmic abilities reflected the villain's consistent characterization as someone who could never accept that others might possess power he lacked. Doom's ego was such that any demonstration of superior capability by another individual represented a personal insult, a challenge that had to be answered. His repeated attempts to drain the cosmic energy from Peter, the elaborate devices he constructed, the various schemes he implemented, all stemmed from this fundamental aspect of his personality. What made Doom's failure particularly significant was that even his genius, his mastery of both science and sorcery, proved insufficient to claim the Enigma Force's power. The cosmic entity recognized that Doom's motivations were fundamentally selfish, that he would use such abilities for conquest rather than protection, and it resisted his every attempt at theft or manipulation. This rejection by the Enigma Force, this absolute failure to achieve something he desperately wanted, added another entry to Doom's long list of grudges against Spider-Man specifically and heroes in general. The mysterious lackey who sabotaged various villain schemes throughout acts of vengeance remained one of the crossover's intriguing unresolved elements. This unknown individual, working behind the scenes to undermine the Prime Mover's plans, played a crucial role in preventing some of the conspiracy's worst potential outcomes. The lackey's interference with Doom's Test 1, corrupting the data and preventing the successful extraction of Spider-Man's powers, directly contributed to Peter retaining his abilities long enough to face the Tri-Sentinel. Whether the lackey was a hero in disguise, a villain with competing interests, or something else entirely, their identity and motivations added an element of mystery to the broader storyline. Some readers speculated about possible identities for this saboteur, proposing various characters who might have had reason to work against the villain conspiracy, but no definitive answer was ever provided within the comics themselves. This ambiguity allowed for interesting speculation and interpretation, with different readers potentially reaching different conclusions about who the lackey was and what they hoped to achieve. The public relations aspect of Spider-Man's cosmic period deserves examination as well, particularly how it reflected real-world concerns about power and accountability. New Yorkers' fear of cosmically empowered Spider-Man mirrored broader anxieties about unchecked power, about what happens when individuals possess abilities that place them beyond normal constraints and consequences. Even though Spider-Man had been protecting the city for years, even though he'd repeatedly demonstrated his commitment to helping people, the dramatic increase in his power level made citizens question whether they could still trust him. This fear wasn't entirely irrational. History, both fictional and real, had shown that absolute power corrupted, that even well-intentioned individuals could become tyrannical when they possessed capabilities far beyond their peers. The fact that Peter proved himself trustworthy despite his cosmic abilities, that he used those powers solely for protection and then surrendered them when they were no longer needed, represented a kind of vindication for the optimistic view that character matters more than capability. J. Jonah Jameson's response to Cosmic Spider-Man provided some dark comedy amid the serious events. The Daily Bugle publisher's relentless crusade against the web-slinger reaching new heights of absurdity as Spider-Man's power level increased. Jameson had always positioned Spider-Man as a menace, arguing that masked vigilantes operating outside the law represented dangers to society regardless of their intentions. When Spider-Man gained cosmic abilities, when he could fly and shoot energy beams and defeat the Hulk, Jameson's editorials reached fever pitch, declaring that this only proved how right he'd been all along about the threat Spider-Man posed. The fact that Cosmic Spider-Man saved countless lives, prevented a nuclear catastrophe, and consistently acted heroically did nothing to change Jameson's fundamental position. In some ways, this consistency was almost admirable in its stubbornness. Jameson refused to let facts interfere with his established opinions, maintaining his crusade against Spider-Man even when doing so required increasingly tortured logic. The relationship between Jameson and Spider-Man during this period highlighted how prejudice and preconceived notions could persist regardless of evidence, how some people would never be convinced no matter how many times their beliefs were proven wrong. The emotional journey Peter experienced during his time with cosmic powers added human dimension to what could have been a simple power fantasy story. Peter's confusion about the source of his abilities, his struggles to control them, his fears about what they were doing to his humanity, all grounded the cosmic adventures in relatable feelings and concerns. When he worried that Mary Jane was afraid of him, that he was becoming something alien and distant, those fears reflected genuine relationship anxieties that many readers could understand even if they'd never wielded cosmic power. When he questioned whether having such abilities made him responsible for solving every problem in the world, whether he was obligated to use his power at all times to its fullest extent, he was grappling with ethical questions about duty and limits that extended beyond superhero contexts. The relief he felt when the powers finally departed, when he returned to being regular Spider-Man, spoke to the burden those abilities had represented, the psychological weight of possessing power so far beyond normal human scales. Mary Jane's perspective during this period, while often not as prominently featured as Peter's experiences, provided important grounding and context for understanding how the cosmic transformation affected their relationship. She watched her husband become something increasingly alien, saw him display abilities that defied her understanding of how the world worked, worried about whether the Peter Parker she loved still existed beneath all that cosmic energy. Her support for him never wavered, but the strain was evident, the fear that she might lose him to power that pulled him toward cosmic concerns far removed from their life together. When the Enigma Force finally departed and Peter returned to his normal power levels, Mary Jane's relief was palpable, her gratitude at getting her husband back evident in every interaction. Their relationship surviving the cosmic power period intact demonstrated the strength of their bond, how love and commitment could endure even when one partner underwent fundamental transformations that would destroy most relationships. The technical aspects of how cosmic powers were portrayed in the comics deserve recognition for their creativity and internal consistency. The writers and artists had to visualize abilities that went far beyond traditional superhero power sets, finding ways to depict reality manipulation, energy projection, matter transformation, and cosmic awareness in ways that readers could understand and appreciate. The visual language developed during this period, with glowing auras, starfield effects, distorted reality around powerful figures, and dramatic energy displays, influenced how cosmic-level powers would be portrayed in comics for years afterward. The challenge of making cosmic power seem impressive without making Spider-Man unbeatable, of maintaining dramatic tension when the protagonist could theoretically solve any problem through overwhelming force, required careful plotting and attention to the limitations even cosmic abilities possessed. The Tri-Sentinel battle succeeded as a climax precisely because it presented a threat where raw power wasn't sufficient, where victory required intelligence, precision, and sacrifice rather than simply hitting harder than the enemy. The philosophical implications of the Enigma Force's selection process raise interesting questions about destiny, worthiness, and the nature of heroism. If the cosmic entity chose Peter Parker specifically because it recognized qualities in him that made him suitable as Captain Universe, does that suggest some form of cosmic predestination? Was Peter always meant to receive these powers at this particular moment, or did the Enigma Force simply react to circumstances and choose the best available option when needed? The temporary nature of Captain Universe's role, with the Enigma Force moving from host to host as different crises required its intervention, suggested that being chosen wasn't about permanent elevation, but about fulfilling specific purposes. Peter wasn't selected because he was inherently superior to other heroes, but because his combination of abilities, character, and position made him the right choice for addressing the threats that emerged during acts of vengeance. Once those threats were resolved, the Enigma Force moved on, seeking another champion for another crisis, continuing its eternal mission of protecting the universe from existential dangers. The legacy of Cosmic Spider-Man extended into discussions about power scaling in superhero comics, about what happens when characters receive temporary boosts that elevate them far beyond their normal capabilities. Such power-ups were common in comics, with heroes regularly gaining enhanced abilities for specific story arcs before returning to baseline. What made Spider-Man's cosmic period notable was its duration and the extent of the power increase. This wasn't a brief moment of enhanced strength or a single-issue power boost. It was weeks of comics where Spider-Man operated at a completely different level, facing enemies he'd never normally encounter and displaying abilities that had nothing to do with spiders. The storyline demonstrated how such dramatic power increases could be handled effectively through strong characterization and attention to consequences, how the focus could remain on the character rather than just spectacle if writers approached the material thoughtfully. It also showed the importance of ending such power-ups definitively, of returning characters to their baseline abilities, so future stories wouldn't have to constantly explain why the hero wasn't using cosmic powers to solve every problem. The Enigma Force itself represented an interesting approach to cosmic power in the Marvel Universe, distinct from other sources of ultimate ability. Unlike the power cosmic wielded by Galactus and his heralds, which was granted by a specific entity for specific purposes, the Enigma Force seemed to be an independent cosmic force with its own agenda and motivations. Unlike the Infinity Gems, which could be claimed by anyone who possessed them regardless of worthiness, the Enigma Force chose its hosts based on character and suitability. Unlike mystical sources of power that required study and mastery, the Enigma Force granted its abilities instantly, though full understanding might take time to develop. This unique position in Marvel's cosmic hierarchy made the Enigma Force particularly interesting as a plot device, a way to temporarily elevate characters without permanently disrupting power hierarchies or creating continuity problems about why heroes didn't always use ultimate abilities. The battle choreography during Spider-Man's cosmic period demonstrated creative approaches to depicting power far beyond street-level superheroics. When Spider-Man fought the Hulk, and their punches created shockwaves that shattered windows blocks away. When he battled Magneto, and their energy exchanges lit up the sky. When he faced the Tri-Sentinel and the struggle demolished buildings, these fights conveyed scale and power in ways that typical Spider-Man battles didn't require. The artists had to show Spider-Man moving differently, fighting differently, approaching combat with strategies that reflected his enhanced capabilities. The kinetic, acrobatic fighting style that characterized normal Spider-Man battles gave way to more direct, forceful approaches when cosmic powers were involved, though Peter still tried to incorporate his agility and spider sense into combat situations. The evolution of his fighting style reflected his gradually improving understanding of his cosmic abilities, moving from confusion and hesitation to more confident and effective use of powers he barely understood. The psychological impact of wielding cosmic power and then losing it deserved more exploration than the comics always provided. Peter experienced abilities that let him perceive reality itself, that made him aware of threats across vast distances, that gave him godlike control over energy and matter. Returning to his normal spider powers after experiencing that level of capability must have felt incredibly limiting, like losing senses he'd briefly possessed and had come to rely on. The cosmic awareness especially, that deep understanding of how the universe functioned, would have been difficult to surrender, leaving Peter with memories of comprehension he could no longer access. Yet the comics showed Peter handling this loss with remarkable grace, accepting the departure of cosmic powers as necessary and even desirable, rather than clinging desperately to abilities he'd briefly possessed. This emotional maturity, this recognition that some powers weren't meant to be kept permanently regardless of how useful they might be, demonstrated Peter's fundamental wisdom and selflessness. The role of other heroes during Spider-Man's cosmic period provided interesting context for how the broader Marvel Universe responded to one of their own being dramatically empowered. The Avengers, Fantastic Four, and other major teams were largely dealing with their own acts of vengeance problems, facing villain swaps that challenged them in new ways. But word of Spider-Man's enhanced abilities spread through the hero community, raising questions about whether he should be recruited for bigger teams, whether Cosmic Spider-Man belonged on the Avengers, or even more cosmic-focused teams. These discussions never fully materialized because the power-up proved temporary, but they highlighted how Spider-Man's status in the Marvel hierarchy would have shifted dramatically if he'd remained cosmically empowered. A Spider-Man who could challenge the Hulk and defeat Tri-Sentinels wasn't a street-level hero anymore. He was someone who belonged in conversations about the most powerful beings on Earth, someone whose absence from major cosmic conflicts would require explanation. The connection between Spider-Man's cosmic period and later multiverse events demonstrated the lasting resonance of the concept. Earth 13. Spider-Man appearing during Spider-Verse wasn't just a callback to the Acts of Vengeance storyline. It was an exploration of what might have happened if Peter had kept those powers permanently, how his life and heroic career would have evolved differently. The fact that even Cosmic Spider-Man fell to solace, that unlimited power proved insufficient against an enemy of sufficient age and experience, reinforced themes about the limitations of power alone. Earth 13. Peter died heroically, using his cosmic abilities to buy time for other spider heroes, demonstrating that character mattered more than capability in defining true heroism. His death echoed the mainstream Peter's willingness to sacrifice cosmic powers to save lives, showing that across the multiverse, Spider-Man fundamentally remained Spider-Man regardless of power level. The artwork throughout Spider-Man's cosmic period balanced spectacular displays of power with intimate character moments, ensuring the story never became just spectacle without substance. Panels showing Peter and Mary Jane talking in their apartment carried equal weight with splash pages of Spider-Man punching the Hulk into orbit, reminding readers that beneath all the cosmic energy, these were stories about people dealing with extraordinary circumstances. The artists understood that making readers care about cosmic-level battles required first making them care about the characters involved, that even the most spectacular action sequence would feel hollow if the emotional stakes weren't clear. The quiet moments, Peter's expressions of confusion or fear or determination, Mary Jane's concern and support, the reactions of ordinary New Yorkers witnessing events beyond their comprehension, all contributed to grounding cosmic adventures in relatable human experience. The comparison between Cosmic Spider-Man and Superman, inevitable given the similar power levels and the deliberate visual references in McFarlane's artwork, highlighted interesting differences in how DC and Marvel approached ultimate power in their heroes. Superman had always been cosmically powerful, raised from childhood with abilities that made him godlike compared to normal humans. His entire character was built around the question of what someone with ultimate power would do if they were fundamentally decent and raised with good values. Spider-Man, by contrast, started as a street-level hero and temporarily gained cosmic abilities, providing a different perspective on the same basic question. Where Superman had a lifetime to integrate his powers into his identity, Peter had weeks to figure out what cosmic abilities meant for who he was. Where Superman's challenge was maintaining humanity despite always being powerful, Peter's challenge was maintaining his sense of self during a dramatic transformation. Both characters ultimately demonstrated that power didn't corrupt when wielded by truly good people, but they approached that theme from very different angles that reflected their distinct origins and philosophies. The business aspects of the Cosmic Spider-Man storyline deserve mention as well, particularly how it represented Marvel's approach to event comics and character development in the late 1980s. Acts of Vengeance was a line-wide crossover designed to boost sales across multiple titles by creating interconnected stories that encouraged readers to follow events in books they might not normally purchase. Spider-Man's cosmic power-up served multiple purposes within this framework. It made Amazing Spider-Man issues essential reading for fans following the crossover. It created memorable moments that generated word-of-mouth publicity. It allowed Spider-Man to interact with characters from other corners of the Marvel Universe in ways that wouldn't normally make sense. The storyline's success in achieving these goals while maintaining strong characterization demonstrated that commercial considerations and creative quality didn't have to be mutually exclusive, that well-crafted stories could simultaneously serve business objectives and provide genuine artistic merit. The theological and mythological dimensions of Spider-Man becoming Captain Universe added layers of meaning beyond straightforward superhero action. The concept of a mortal being temporarily possessed by divine or cosmic power appeared across numerous mythologies and religious traditions, from prophets receiving visions from God to heroes being blessed by deities for specific quests. Spider-Man's experience as Captain Universe fit within this archetypal pattern, an ordinary person called to extraordinary purpose through the intervention of forces beyond normal comprehension. The Enigma Force functioned almost like a benevolent deity, choosing champions, granting power, guiding actions toward beneficial outcomes, then withdrawing once its purpose was fulfilled. Peter's journey from confusion about his new abilities through revelation of their true nature to final acceptance of their departure paralleled religious narratives of divine calling, enlightenment, and return to ordinary life transformed by the experience. These mythological resonances added depth to what could have been a simple power fantasy, connecting Spider-Man's cosmic adventure to broader human stories about meaning, purpose, and transcendence. The science fiction elements of the storyline, particularly the concepts around extra-dimensional energy and cosmic awareness, reflected Marvel's long tradition of blending superhero action with speculative scientific concepts. Professor Lubitsch's machine, attempting to tap extra-dimensional power sources, represented hard science fiction ideas about energy being accessed from other dimensions or realities. The Enigma Force, existing outside normal space-time, bonding with hosts across the universe, suggested cosmic entities operating on scales and with motivations beyond human comprehension. The Tri-Sentinel's combination of advanced robotics, energy weapons, and nuclear payloads represented near-future military technology taken to logical extremes. These science fiction foundations gave the cosmic power storyline a different flavor than purely magical or mystical power-ups, grounding the fantastic elements in pseudo-scientific explanations that fit Marvel's general approach to superhero storytelling. The enduring popularity of Cosmic Spider-Man, decades after the original storyline, spoke to how effectively it captured something essential about the character while taking him in unexpected directions. Fans continued creating artwork depicting Cosmic Spider-Man, writing fan fiction exploring what-if scenarios around Peter keeping the powers, discussing how he compared to other cosmically powered heroes across both Marvel and DC. The storyline appeared on lists of the best Spider-Man stories, most memorable Spider-Man moments, and most significant Spider-Man transformations with remarkable consistency. New readers discovering the Acts of Vengeance period through collected editions or digital comics found the storyline remained compelling despite being decades old, the fundamental questions about power and responsibility transcending the specific context of late 1980s Marvel continuity. This longevity demonstrated that while comics were often dismissed as disposable entertainment, the best storylines achieved lasting cultural relevance through strong characterization, meaningful themes, and memorable execution. The Cosmic Spider-Man period ultimately served as a character study wrapped in spectacular superhero action, an exploration of who Peter Parker was at his core by testing him in circumstances far removed from his usual experience. By giving him nearly unlimited power and then watching how he used it, the storyline revealed fundamental truths about Spider-Man's character that normal adventures couldn't demonstrate as clearly. Peter didn't seek domination, didn't let power corrupt him, didn't lose sight of his core mission to protect innocent people, and willingly surrendered abilities that most people would have desperately tried to keep. These choices defined Spider-Man more completely than any number of villain defeats or heroic speeches could have managed. When readers think about who Spider-Man is, what he represents, why he matters as a character, Peter's brief time as a god provides perfect examples of heroism defined by character rather than capability, of power wielded responsibly because the person holding it understood that strength obligated rather than entitled. So if you enjoyed diving deep into the lore of Spider-Man's transformation into a cosmic being, into his battles against impossible odds, into his ultimate sacrifice of godlike power to save millions of lives, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. There are countless more stories from across comic book history waiting to be explored, characters whose journeys deserve this level of detailed examination, moments that defined entire eras of superhero storytelling. The lore runs deep, friends, and we're just getting started uncovering all its secrets. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.